The air on Xylo's Prime tasted like burned copper and despair. I remember that taste because it was the last thing I experienced before everything changed. The metallic tang coated my tongue, settled in my throat, and made each breath feel like swallowing coins. The sky above the capital city churned with the characteristic orange-tinged clouds that had hung there for generations, but on that particular morning, they seemed heavier than usual, more oppressive. My name is Lyra. At least that's what I called myself. My real name, the one my father gave me, is Serania Vexhaler, Princess of the 11th House, heir to the throne of the Xylos Empire. None of that meant anything anymore. The throne room stretched before me like a wound in the fabric of reality. Black marble floors polished to a mirror shine reflected the massive crystalline pillars that supported the ceiling 300 feet above. At the far end, sitting upon the obsidian throne, was my father, Emperor Vexhaler the Unyielding. He'd earned that title through decades of conquest, through the subjugation of 7-star systems, through the systematic destruction of anyone who dared oppose his will. He was also, at that moment, staring at me like I was a disease he needed to cut out. "Say it again," he commanded. His voice didn't need to raise. It never did. The acoustics of the throne room were designed to carry every whisper, every breath, every tremor of fear from those who stood before him. "I want to hear the treason fall from your lips one more time." I stood in the center of the room, alone. No guards flanked me. No advisors stood at my side. I'd been summoned here at the equivalent of 4 in the morning, dragged from my quarters by soldiers who wouldn't meet my eyes. They'd known what was coming. Everyone knew. "The Genox Accord is a genocide," I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. "You're not liberating the Renari system. You're exterminating them." A ripple went through the gathered courtiers who lined the walls. I could feel their eyes on me, a mixture of horror and something else, something that might have been hope. I'd learned to read my people over my 57 years of life. I knew which nobles secretly despised my father's reign. I knew which generals had doubts about the endless expansion. I knew which advisors had whispered to me in dark corners, begging me to do something. But knowing and acting were two different things. My father leaned forward on his throne. He was massive, even by Xylo's standards. 7 feet of scaled muscle and barely contained fury. His eyes, the same amber gold as mine, narrowed to slits as he studied me like I was a particularly interesting insect that had crawled onto his dinner plate. "You speak of genocide," he said slowly, "as if it is something to be ashamed of. As if the Renari are anything more than vermin who have infested a system we rightfully claim. They are primitive. They are weak. They are sentient beings," I interrupted. The words came out sharper than I intended. "They have art, culture, families. They have languages and histories that predate our empire, and you're burning their worlds because they refuse to bow to you." The temperature in the room seemed to drop by 10 degrees. My father rose from his throne. The movement was slow, deliberate, terrifying. He descended the steps one by one, each footfall echoing like a death knell through the chamber. The courtiers pressed themselves against the walls, trying to become invisible. I didn't blame them. I wished I could do the same. He stopped directly in front of me. I had to crane my neck to meet his gaze. "Let me explain something to you, daughter," he said. His voice was soft now, which made it infinitely worse. "I have built this empire from nothing. I have spilled blood in quantities you cannot fathom. I have crushed civilizations that had existed for millennia, and I have done it all for one reason." He leaned down, his face inches from mine. I could smell the rot on his breath, the remnants of whatever exotic creature he'd consumed for his evening meal. "Legacy," he whispered. "You are my legacy, my heir, my continuation, and you stand before me and call me a monster." "I didn't call you." "You didn't have to." He straightened up, looking down at me with something that might have been disappointment or disgust. "I see it in your eyes, I hear it in your voice. You have been poisoned, Serania, corrupted by weakness and sentiment. You care about the Renari. You care about the servants who bow to you. You care about the soldiers who die for this empire. Someone should, I said. The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. My head snapped to the side, and I tasted blood where my teeth had cut the inside of my cheek. The taste of copper was stronger now, mixed with something metallic and wrong. That is your father you speak to, he growled. Your emperor, your god for all practical purposes, and you will show me respect or you will learn what happens to those who don't. I turned back to face him. My cheek was already swelling. I could feel the heat of it spreading across my face, but I didn't lower my gaze. I didn't back down. You want respect? I asked. Earn it. Stop killing innocents. Stop burning worlds. Stop acting like conquest is the only thing that matters. The throne room was so quiet I could hear the distant hum of the environmental systems that kept the air breathable. No one moved. No one breathed. My father's face went through a series of expressions I'd never seen before. Confusion, shock, fury, and then settling over everything like a mask, cold calculation. You leave me no choice, he said. I had hoped you would see reason. I had hoped that when the time came you would be worthy to sit upon the obsidian throne. But you are not. You are weak. You are broken. You are a stain upon the Vexhaller name. He raised one massive hand and snapped his fingers. The doors to the throne room burst open. A dozen soldiers marched in, their armor gleaming with the sigil of the Emperor's personal guard. They formed a circle around me, weapons drawn, faces hidden behind helmets that revealed nothing. Take her to the edge of the city, my father commanded. Strip her of her titles, strip her of her name, and cast her out into the forest. Father, I am no longer your father. The words were cold, final, absolute. You are nothing. You are less than nothing. You are a reminder of what happens to those who betray the empire. If you survive out there, and you won't, then perhaps you'll come to understand the value of strength, but I doubt it. The soldiers grabbed my arms. I didn't fight them. What would have been the point? The forest, he added, almost as an afterthought. The stalker's territory. Let her become food for the beasts. It's more than she deserves. Chapter 2, The Fall. The stalker's forest. I'd heard stories about it since I was a child. The nursery tales parents told their young to keep them from wandering too far from the city walls. The warnings the soldiers shared in hushed whispers during training exercises. The legends of creatures that could strip a Xylos warrior to bones in seconds. Beings that hunted not for food but for sport. And now I was being thrown into it like garbage. The transport shuttle deposited me at the edge of the forest with all the ceremony of a prisoner being dumped at a labor camp. The soldiers didn't speak to me. They didn't look at me. One of them, a female with scars across her face, pressed a small pack into my hands before I was shoved out the hatch. Her eyes met mine for just a moment. I saw something in them, sympathy, regret. Then the hatch closed, and the shuttle rose into the orange sky, and I was alone. The forest stretched before me like a living nightmare. Trees that reached heights I couldn't comprehend, their branches woven together so tightly that the sky was almost completely obscured. The ground was carpeted with some kind of phosphorescent moss that glowed a sickly green in the perpetual twilight. Strange sounds echoed from the depths, chittering, growling, screaming, all of it warped and distorted by the dense vegetation. I clutched the pack against my chest and tried to remember how to breathe. This was it. This was how I died, cast out by my own father for the crime of having a conscience, left to become prey for the very creatures I'd grown up fearing. The irony wasn't lost on me. I started walking. I don't know why. Survival instinct, maybe. Some primal part of my brain that refused to accept that my life was over. I walked because the alternative was standing still, and standing still felt like surrender. The forest swallowed me whole. Hours passed. or maybe minutes. Time moved differently here, stretching and compressing in ways that felt deliberately designed to drive me insane. The glow of the moss was the only light I had, and it was barely enough to see a few feet in front of me. I tripped over roots and rocks, stumbled through patches of mud, and constantly looked over my shoulder for the movement I was certain was following me. The pack the soldier had given me contained supplies, a water pouch that filtered toxins from the local streams, several packets of concentrated nutrient paste that tasted like nothing and was meant to sustain you for days, a small knife with a blade that glowed faintly blue, a blanket that looked like it had been woven from spider silk, and a communication device. I stared at the device for a long moment, turning it over in my hands. It was old, outdated, the kind of thing that had been obsolete for decades, but it worked. I could see the lights flickering on its surface, connecting to whatever network still existed in this forsaken place. But who would I call? My father's soldiers would just report my location. The nobles who'd whispered in my ear would never risk themselves to save me, and everyone else was too afraid. I tucked the device back in the pack and kept walking. The forest changed as I moved deeper into it. The trees grew thicker, more twisted, their branches forming shapes that almost looked like faces. The moss on the ground became patchier, replaced by bare soil that smelled of rot and decay. The sounds around me grew quieter, more predatory, like something was waiting. And then I saw them. The stalkers. I'd seen drawings, of course. Hollow images captured by the few soldiers who'd survived encounters with these creatures. But the drawings had been sanitized, cleaned up for general consumption. The reality was infinitely worse. They were tall, easily 8 feet, with bodies that seemed to be made of shadow and hunger. Their limbs were too long, too jointed, moving in ways that suggested no bones but plenty of flexibility. Their heads were featureless except for eyes, dozens of eyes, scattered across their faces like stars in a night sky, each one glowing faintly red. There were 3 of them. They emerged from the darkness between the trees like they'd always been there, like they'd just been waiting for me to notice them. I stopped. My heart hammered against my ribs. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the pack. They circled me, moving with that terrible, boneless grace. Their eyes tracked my movements, hundreds of them, all focused on me with the intensity of a predator that had found its prey. And then one of them spoke. Serania Vexhaler, it said. The voice was wrong, too deep, too resonant, vibrating in my chest like a physical weight. The princess who would not kill. How, I choked on the words, how do you know my name? We know all who walk the forest, another one said. We know your heart, we know your fear, we know what you did. What I did. Refused to become a monster. The third one stepped closer, and I could see now that its face, if you could call it a face, was bleeding. Lines of red light were tracing patterns across its skin. The emperor's daughter. The heir to the throne, and you said no. I didn't, I started. You stood against genocide, the first one interrupted. You spoke truth to power, and for that you were cast out. They were circling closer now, their movements hypnotic, almost dance-like. I should have been terrified. I was terrified. But there was something else too, something that felt almost like curiosity. What do you want from me? I asked. The creatures stopped. They looked at each other, their eyeful faces turning to share some communication I couldn't perceive. Then, as one, they looked back at me. We want to thank you, the third one said. Thank me. For being different. The first one raised a hand, and I saw now that it was holding something. A small object barely the size of my palm. For being brave. For being the only one in the entire empire who chose mercy over murder. The creature extended its hand toward me, offering the object. I hesitated for only a moment before taking it. It was a crystal. Clear, flawless, humming with a faint energy I could feel in my bones. Inside it, suspended like a captured star, was a point of light that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. "This is our gift," the creature said. "A seed of the forest. Plant it where you settle and it will grow. It will protect you. It will keep you safe from those who would do you harm." "I don't understand," I said. "Why would you help me?" "We help those who help us." The creature's eyes flickered. "You spoke against the destruction of worlds. We are the guardians of this world. We owe you our lives, and we pay our debts." Before I could ask any more questions, the creatures began to back away. They melted into the shadows between the trees, their forms dissolving like smoke in the wind. The last thing I saw was the glint of those red eyes, watching me, before they were gone. I stood there, alone in the darkness, clutching a crystal that pulsed with starlight. Chapter 3: The Sanctuary. The forest floor was a carpet of life and death. I'd been walking for what felt like days, though it might have been longer. The crystal the stalkers had given me glowed softly in my hand, casting just enough light to see the path ahead. It had also led me here to this place. A clearing in the heart of the forest. Sunlight, real sunlight, not the filtered orange glow of Xylo's prime, filtered through a break in the canopy. The ground was covered in soft green grass that smelled fresh and clean. A stream wound through the center of the clearing, its water so clear I could see the fish swimming beneath the surface. It looked like paradise. I collapsed to my knees in the grass, the weight of everything I'd been through finally catching up with me. The betrayal, the fear, the exhaustion, it all came crashing down at once, and I couldn't hold it back anymore. I cried. I cried for the father who'd thrown me away. I cried for the empire I'd loved and believed in. I cried for the Renari, whose worlds were burning while I sat here in this perfect little clearing, safe and alive. And then, when I had no tears left, I planted the crystal. I didn't know how. I just knew it needed to go into the ground, into the heart of the forest. I dug a hole with my hands, not caring about the dirt under my nails or the mud caked on my skin. I placed the crystal in the hole and covered it with soil. Nothing happened. I sat back, watching the spot where I'd buried the crystal. The forest was quiet around me, peaceful. A bird sang somewhere in the canopy, its song bright and clear. A butterfly with wings of iridescent blue drifted past my face. And then the ground began to shake. I scrambled backward as the soil erupted, a massive vine bursting from the earth like a serpent rising from the depths. It was thick, green, pulsing with the same energy I'd felt from the crystal. It grew and grew, climbing toward the sky, branches splitting off and spreading out, leaves unfurling like flags of victory. Within minutes, a tree had grown in the center of the clearing. Not just any tree, a house. There were windows in its trunk, their surfaces shimmering like water. A door appeared, carved from the wood itself, perfectly suited to my height. A spiral staircase wound around the outside, leading to platforms that looked like balconies. I stood there, my mouth hanging open, watching as my new home grew itself into existence. It was impossible. It was miraculous. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I walked forward and pushed open the door. The inside was even more stunning. A circular room, lit by the soft glow of phosphorescent moss that grew from the walls. Furniture made from living wood, shaped to be comfortable and functional. A fireplace that burned with flames of green and blue, giving off warmth without smoke. A bed covered in soft moss and leaves that looked more inviting than any silk I'd ever slept on. I sank onto the bed and felt something I hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. Safe. Chapter 4: The First Day. Days turned into weeks, turned into months. I learned to live in the forest. The tree provided everything I needed: shelter, warmth, food in the form of fruits that grew from its branches. The creatures of the forest treated me like one of their own, and I learned their ways. I learned which plants healed and which ones killed. I learned the language of the birds, the patterns of the predators, the secrets of the soil. I also learned to be alone. I missed my people. I missed the sounds of the city, the bustle of the market, the laughter of the children in the streets. I missed the taste of real food, the feeling of silk against my skin, the comfort of knowing there were others around me. But I didn't miss the cruelty. I didn't miss the fear. I didn't miss looking at my father and seeing only darkness. The stalkers visited me occasionally. They'd appear at the edge of the clearing, their many eyes watching me with something that might have been affection. We never spoke. They'd just sit there, silent, and then disappear back into the shadows. I came to think of them as guardians, protectors, the only friends I had in this strange new world. I'd been living in the forest for about 6 months. Xylos Prime's orbit around its sun was approximately equivalent to Earth's, so I'd gotten used to measuring time that way, when the first human found me. Chapter 5: The Encounter. I was sitting by the stream, trailing my fingers through the cool water when I heard it. A sound I hadn't heard in the forest before. Not the chittering of the stalkers, not the song of the birds, not the rustle of the leaves. Something new, something mechanical. I looked up and saw a shuttle descending through the canopy. It was unlike any shuttle I'd ever seen. Smaller, sleeker, with markings I didn't recognize. It landed in the clearing with barely a sound, and for a moment I just stared at it, frozen with fear. Was this my father's doing? Had he found me? Had he sent soldiers to finish what he'd started? But when the hatch opened, the figure that emerged wasn't Xylos. She was short, tiny compared to my people. Her skin was pale pink, her hair the color of the sun that occasionally broke through the canopy. Her eyes, impossibly blue, searched the clearing with a mixture of curiosity and caution. She was wearing what I would later learn were human clothes. Practical, functional, designed for survival. She had a pack on her back and a weapon at her hip. And she was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Hello," she called out. Her voice was soft, musical. "I come in peace. I'm not here to hurt you." I didn't move. I couldn't. I was too shocked, too terrified, too overwhelmed. The woman took a step forward, her hands raised in what she probably thought was a non-threatening gesture. "I'm a scientist. I've been studying this system for years. I didn't know anyone lived here. I'm sorry if I'm intruding." "Scientist," the word came out of my mouth in a croak. "Yes," she smiled, and the expression was so warm, so genuine that I felt something break inside me. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. I'm from Earth. She paused, her eyes widening as she got a good look at me. "Wait, you're Xylos." I nodded slowly. "But that's impossible. The Xylos Empire doesn't have any colonies on this planet. This is a protected reserve, a designated—" She stopped mid-sentence. "Unless you're not supposed to be here." "I'm not supposed to be anywhere," I said. The woman Sarah, she'd said her name was Sarah, took another step forward. Her eyes were scanning me, taking in the details of my appearance, my height, my scales, my eyes. "You're the princess," she breathed. "You're the one who stood up to the emperor." "How do you know that?" "The whole galaxy knows that." She shook her head in wonder. "It's all anyone talks about. The Xylos heir who refused to participate in genocide, the princess who chose exile over compliance. You're a legend." "A legend," I laughed, and the sound was bitter. "I'm a castaway, a failure, a daughter who disappointed her father." "No," Sarah took another step forward, and this time she was close enough to touch. "You're a hero. You're the first person in 3 generations to stand up to the Xylos Empire and live." I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen in anyone else's since I'd been cast out. "Hoping. Come with me," she said. "I have food, I have supplies, we can talk, we can figure out what to do next." "Next? You can't stay here forever," she gestured around us. "You're the heir to an empire. You have people waiting for you, a revolution brewing in your name. You can't just hide in the forest." I looked at the tree that had become my home, at the clearing that had become my sanctuary, at the stream that had been my comfort. Yes, I said slowly, yes, I can. Chapter 6: The Unfolding. Sarah Chen was relentless. She'd been in the forest for 3 months now, camping at the edge of my clearing, refusing to leave. She'd brought supplies that she shared with me, real food, the kind I'd missed. We'd spent hours talking about the galaxy, about politics, about the endless war that my father had started. And she'd told me about Earth. Humans are the most unlikely survivors in the galaxy, she'd said one night, sitting by the fire I'd learned to make. We're not the strongest, the fastest, the most intelligent, but we just keep going. We find a way. We don't give up. Is that supposed to be inspiring? I'd asked. She'd laughed. It's supposed to be true. Sarah was different from anyone I'd ever met. She was curious about everything, asking endless questions about my people, my culture, my life before the exile. She listened to my answers with genuine interest, not the practiced attention of a diplomat or the veiled agenda of a spy. She was just kind. And she wouldn't stop trying to convince me to leave. The revolution is real, she insisted one day, sitting across from me at the table that had grown from the floor of my tree house. There are cells forming throughout the empire, people who believe in what you said, in the message you delivered. They're ready to follow you. I don't want followers, I said. I want peace. I want to live my life without violence. So do we. Sarah leaned forward, her blue eyes burning with intensity. That's what they're fighting for. A world without genocide, without expansion, without the endless conquest. I looked away. I can't. Why not? Because I'm afraid. The words came out in a whisper. I'm afraid of him. I'm afraid of what he'll do to anyone who follows me. I'm afraid of what I'll become if I try to lead a revolution. Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was soft, warm, surprisingly strong. You're afraid of becoming him, she said. I understand. But you're not him, Sarania. You were never him. He threw you away because you were better than he could ever be. I started to cry again. Chapter 7: The Decision. It was a year after Sarah's arrival that the first attack came. I woke in the middle of the night to a sound I'd hoped never to hear again. The whine of engines. The crash of weapons fire. The screams of things dying. I ran to the window and saw the impossible. Xylo's soldiers were in the clearing. Dozens of them, their armor gleaming in the light of the fire that had consumed Sarah's camp. They were cutting down the trees, burning the underbrush, searching for something. Searching for me. Sarah was there, her weapon raised, fighting with a ferocity I hadn't known she possessed. She took down 3 soldiers before they overwhelmed her, pinning her to the ground with brutal efficiency. Where is she? One of them demanded. Where is the traitor? Sarah said nothing. She just smiled, blood streaming from a cut on her forehead. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. I'm just a scientist. I'm here to study the flora and fauna. You're lying. The soldier raised his weapon. I'll give you one chance. Tell me where the princess is and I might let you live. I had to act. I couldn't let Sarah die for me. I couldn't let anyone else die for me. I stepped out of the tree and into the clearing. I'm here, I said. Leave her alone. The soldiers turned to face me. I could see the surprise in their eyes, the shock of finding their quarry so easily. Serania Vexhaller, the leader said, you are under arrest by order of Emperor Vexhaller. You are to be returned to the capital for judgment and execution. No, I said. No. I said no. I took a step forward and the soldiers took a step back. I was still a princess, even if I'd been exiled. They remembered what that meant. I'm not going back. I'm not going to let him kill me, and I'm not going to let him kill her. The leader raised his weapon. You don't have a choice. Actually, Sarah said, breaking free of the soldiers who'd been holding her, she does. She had a grenade in her hand. Where it came from, I don't know, but it was there and the soldiers saw it and their faces went pale. "Back up," she said, "or we all go up." The soldiers didn't move. They just stood there, trapped between their mission and their survival. "Last chance," Sarah said. "Back up or die." The leader lowered his weapon. "We'll be back," he said. "You can't hide forever." "Watch us," Sarah said. The soldiers retreated, their shuttle lifting off and disappearing through the canopy. Sarah let out a long breath and slumped against me. "What just happened?" I asked. "I bought us time." She looked at me, her blue eyes steady. "But it's not going to last. They're going to come back. They're going to keep coming back until they either catch you or kill us both." I knew she was right. "I'll go with you," I said. "The revolution, your people, I'll go." Sarah smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Part 2, The Rise. Chapter 8, The Flight. We traveled for what felt like forever. Sarah's shuttle was small, cramped, designed for long missions rather than comfortable transport. But it was fast, and it was stealthy, and it kept us off the Xylo's sensors as we fled through the system. Sarah taught me about Earth during the journey. She showed me hollow images of blue skies and green fields, of cities that sparkled like jewels, of oceans that stretched to the horizon. She told me about her family, her friends, the life she'd left behind to explore the galaxy. "I've been away for a while," she said, "but I still miss it, the smell of rain, the taste of real coffee, the sound of laughter." "Laughter," I repeated. "We don't laugh much on Xylo's Prime." "Then I'll teach you," she grinned. "It's easy. You just make a sound that comes from your chest and you let it out, like this, ha ha ha." I tried. It came out as a kind of wheeze. "That's not bad," Sarah said. "We'll work on it." We landed on a small moon in the Renari system. It was a rebel outpost, hidden among the asteroids that orbited the gas giant below. The base was home to a few dozen beings, Xylos, Renari, a handful of humans like Sarah. They welcomed me with open arms. "You're the princess," one of the rebels said, "the one who said no to the emperor." "I'm not a princess anymore," I said. "I'm just Serania." "Serania Vexhaler," the rebel corrected, "the daughter who stood up to her father, the woman who refused to become a monster." I felt a lump in my throat. "Thank you." Chapter 9, The Revolution. The months that followed were a blur of planning, training, and preparation. Sarah and I worked together, building alliances, gathering intelligence, preparing for the inevitable confrontation with my father. The rebellion grew, drawing strength from my presence and the hope I represented. It all came to a head on the anniversary of my exile. We had a fleet now. A small one, barely a dozen ships, but each one crewed by beings who believed in a better future. We'd gathered near Xylo's Prime, waiting for the moment when the Emperor's forces would be at their weakest. "The capital is heavily guarded," our commander said. "We'll need to be fast, precise, and ruthless." "No," I said. "That's what he wants, that's what he expects. We can't fight him on his terms." "Then what do you suggest?" "We fight him on ours." I explained my plan. It was risky, insane, likely to get us all killed, but it was also the only way. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked me later when we were alone. "I'm sure," I took her hand. "He took everything from me, my home, my title, my family. But he didn't take my heart. He didn't take my soul, and I'm going to prove to him, to everyone, that I'm not the monster he wanted me to be." Sarah smiled. "That's my princess." Chapter 10, The Confrontation. The battle lasted for hours. I'd never seen so much destruction, ships exploding, soldiers dying, screaming, crying, chaos. It was everything I'd feared, everything I'd tried to avoid. But we won. When the last of my father's forces surrendered, I walked into the throne room. He was there, sitting on the obsidian throne, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Sarah," he said, "you came back." I came to end this, I said. I came to show you what you've become. Don't lecture me. He rose from the throne, his massive form towering over me. Don't pretend you know what it means to rule. I know what it means to be a person, I said. I know what it means to care. I know what it means to protect. Those are things you've forgotten. Care, he laughed. Protect. Those are weaknesses. They're what will destroy you. No, I said. They're what will save me. I raised my hand and the stalkers appeared. They'd come with us, hidden in the shadows, waiting for this moment. They surrounded my father, their many eyes glinting with ancient hunger. What are these? He demanded. What have you brought into my throne room? Your future, I said, or your death, it's your choice. My father looked at the stalkers, at the soldiers who were slowly filing into the throne room, at the rebels who were taking positions around him. He was defeated, and he knew it. Fine, he said, you win. Then step down. I looked him in the eye. Step down and I'll let you live. Step down and I'll let you watch as I build something better. You'll fail, he said. Maybe, I shrugged, but at least I'll try. Chapter 11, The New Beginning. I sat on the obsidian throne for the first time. It was uncomfortable, hard, cold, but I sat there anyway because it was time. Time to start something new, time to build something better. Sarah stood beside me, her hand on my shoulder. Are you ready? She asked. I'm ready. I looked out at the gathered crowd, rebels and nobles, soldiers and commoners. They were all watching me, waiting for my first words. Today, I said, we begin again. We put aside the cruelty of the past. We embrace the hope of the future. We stand together, beings of all races, all species, all worlds. We stand together because we are better than what we were. The crowd cheered. I smiled, and for the first time in my life, I felt something I'd never expected to feel. Peace.